welcome back to those of you who joined us yesterday, and welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time this morning. Welcome to this session on servicing Europe's growing offshore wind industry as part of Breakbulk Europe Connect 21. We're so delighted to have you all here joining us virtually today on the days where we should have been together in Bremen, and really hope that you enjoyed the sessions if you tuned in yesterday and are looking forward to today's lineup. Before I hand over to our fantastic speakers, I would first like to thank our sponsor for this session, the Port of Tyne, and will now play a short video from them.
Welcome to the Northeast's most versatile clean energy site, providing a unique opportunity to the renewables sector. Tyne Clean Energy Park offers you a fantastic opportunity to establish a long-term operational base in a unique location at the Port of Tyne. Port of Tyne is one of only 2 deep-sea ports in the north of England, and with no height or beam restrictions, offers you unrestricted marine lock-free access 24/7. Our development-ready blank canvas of 200 acres offers you the maximum flexibility for a cost-competitive build to your own specifications, and to become part of the UK's fastest growing and most important UK offshore cluster. Tyne Clean Energy Park will create thousands of jobs, and you could be part of this important job generation. And you'll also benefit from access to the local pool of offshore energy industry professionals who have highly transferable skills for the renewables sector. This convenient and strategic location is already a safe haven for offshore wind operators and renewables specialists, offering you efficient marine access to existing offshore wind farm sites, including Dogger Bank, Sea Green and Sophia, and outstanding air, road and rail transport links to the rest of the UK and beyond. Port of Tyne has already made a commitment to decarbonisation, and as a low-carbon green business hub, the Tyne Clean Energy Park will play an important role in supporting the government's goal to power every UK home with offshore wind electricity. To find out more about becoming part of this flagship development, and to benefit from this outstanding development opportunity, visit portoftyne.co.uk.
Many thanks again to the Port of Tyne for sponsoring today's session. So before we get started, I would just like to quickly go over a couple of housekeeping points. So firstly, this webinar will be available on demand after the session, as I know that this is a question that is often asked, and we will be hosting a live Q&A with the panelists after the discussion. So please ask any questions you have in the Q&A tab on your right-hand side, and we'll do our best to get to them at the end of the session. I would now like to hand over to Alexandra Fløtre, who is the Vice President of Offshore Wind at Rystad Energy and will be moderating today's discussion. Over to you, Alexandra.
Thank you for that, Liz, and pleased to be part of this panel discussion that I will be moderating. I'm joined here today by 3 panelists, the first being Heiko Felderhoff, Managing Director at the Heron and Partner Group, and also Managing Director for SAL Renewables, with experience from both the oil and gas, but also heavy lift, heavy maintenance and operations industry, both within renewables and other adjacent industries. Then I'm also joined by Simon Brett, which is the Commercial Director for Port Services at the Port of Tyne. He has a long experience within the maritime operations and is now responsible for the offshore segment within Port of Tyne. Lastly, I also pleased to be joined by Thomas Sender Mehl, who is responsible for the sales and operations planning at KK Wind Solutions globally. So very pleased to be joined by you 3. Welcome to this panel. I wanted to get started with this discussion where we will discuss some of the outlook for the European offshore wind industry, and also some of the potential bottlenecks, supply chain challenges, and basically see what are the keys to success to succeed in the industry to achieve the ambitious goals set by nations and developers. So let me start by just setting the scene a little bit. We at Rystad Energy sees the European offshore wind market reaching around 52 gigawatts by 2025. So that is almost 30 gigawatts added capacity from last year's 24.3 gigawatts that we saw becoming operational. that is, more than a doubling of the capacity. Then towards 2030, we see more than a doubling again, reaching more than 115 gigawatts. It's a rapid ramp up where the more established countries such as UK, Germany are setting ambitious targets, and then newcomers such as France, Poland are joining the race. And then other countries such as Denmark is planning these large hubs for additional capacities coming online. We do see new plans coming out all the time and a very, very rapid growth. And my question to begin this discussion is then, is the industry ready for this rapid ramp up? And Heiko, maybe I can start with you. Do you agree with this market outlook, and do you think the industry is ready?
Yeah, definitely. So I agree with the outlook. And what we're looking into with SRL Renewable is pretty much on the maintenance side, where I think we have to give the market a full-fledged services, which includes also main component exchange. We have a factory in Emden where we're overhauling the parts, giving warranty on it again. And offering the full-fledged service for the lifespan of the wind park. I mean, if the wind park owner starts with turbines from the Siemens Gamesa, for example, there's 5 years guarantee, and then what then? So they are more focusing on the new markets, and we are going now for the after sales market, you can say, and offering the full-fledged maintenance services, including of repowering after the life cycle of the parks. So I think this is the huge potential in the North Sea, Baltic Sea area here in the north, and that's what we're focusing in to offer that to the client.
Exactly. So not just a growing kind of a buildup of new capacity, but also a growing installed base and a growing aftermarket. Indeed, yes. Thomas, do you agree with this, or do you kind of do you see the same outlook, and do you see the industry being ready?
We definitely see the same outlook here at KK Wind Solutions. We also, as Heiko mentioned, we also seeing a rapidly exploding repowering market and also the service market. And we also see a kind of a more trend going into to the OEMs actually, outsourcing a lot of these things they normally would do themselves, right? So which we, I guess, a couple of years ago saw as a core for them. They actually, give us full power and actually outsourcing a lot of the assembly and also the service part. Even we are going back tier 1, 2, 3 in the supply chain, actually working on the agreements from the OEMs, which is a really sign of trust. So I think the trust between our biggest customers, and that comes from all the OEMs. So we actually we're seeing a trend moving into this area with the repowering, but also I think the rising offshore market is definitely also globally moving. So a lot moving into the Asia Pacific area, away from the UK. We see a trend in France picking up. I guess also Siemens Gamesa is ramping up with a new factory in Le Havre. So I guess I think the offshore market is moving a bit to what we know today. So I think if we look a bit ahead, so in 2025 we will see a different market than we see today.
Yeah, definitely true, and we see the same thing with China driving the global markets today, but also other Asian countries picking up the pace towards 2025 and 2030, and then of course also the US being a driver, and that will also pull some capacities away from Europe or add to that. So we do see some of these dynamics as well. Simon, maybe want to kind of get your views on the same question before we kind of dive into other details of this market. Yeah, the floor is yours.
So I think in the UK, definitely we got a flood of projects which are due to start to come online from 2024, 2025 onwards. And I think the main challenge is, yes, the industry is ready. There's a desire to put these projects in. I think the main challenges, and I know we'll come on to it later, is the pinch points around the supply chain, and the supply chain not just on the availability of the components themselves, but also on the ability to load and to install the projects. If you've got a lot of European projects, so you're going to have projects in the UK, Belgium, Holland, Germany, Denmark, all coming together at the same time, then there's going to be a massive demand for tier one installation companies and facilities. And I think nobody's ever thought about the sequencing of these projects. Everybody wants their projects installed at the same time, and that's where the challenge is going to come.
Exactly, and a very, very good point, and that brings us to that next point of the installation challenges that we see. And I guess, we do see the same thing, not too rapid growth in these kind of next coming years in Europe, but a lot of projects being centered towards the second half of this decade, and everyone, as you say, want to do this at the same time. Do you see, Simon, maybe we can follow up on that one, do you see kind of that installation challenge of everyone wanting to do it at the same time as the key challenge for the European industry?
I think there's no doubt about that. We started flagging it up about 18 months ago in the UK, that particularly off of the port of Tyne, we've got a number of farms being developed within sort of 150 kilometers of this port, and all of the time horizons, Alexander, are at the same area, and we're just saying, well, who's going to make the decision on which one gets priority? Because there's only a certain number of ports, there's only a certain number of installation companies, and that can happen at the same time. And the land-hungry nature of an installation activity means that you are very, very limited on port capacity. If you look at the east coast of the UK, you've got probably 5 or 6 ports at most up and down the east coast that can take the largest installation craft, and each one wants its own tier one supplier. Who's going to make the priority, the decision? It doesn't seem to have a coherent argument here, or a coherent decision as to who's going to get priority and which one's going to go first. And I think with Europe catching the UK up very, very quickly, bearing in mind most of these tier one installation companies are European, they're going to want to service the European market as well. So there's going to be significant competition, and competition will drive prices up, I think.
I completely agree, Simon. This is there's definitely these bottlenecks, and I think when we get to on the supply chain part, we'll also hit the supply chain, because shifting within a 6 months horizon on an offshore project really hits a hammer on the supply chain setups. Then you have all these long lead time items standing around, some of them being produced in the Far East or Vietnam or whatever, and they're simply bulking up in the different ports, and they're trying to shift around. We see that a lot, that at least it has been the trend the last year has been really different. But if you look 10 years back, I don't know, it's kind of it's much more volatile than it has been before. We've seen a lot of projects moving out and in, and trying to keep up with rapid, also increasing development time of the turbine types you see come out of the OEMs. Just the last 3 years, it just GE, Siemens Gamesa, Vestas, now Vestas Offshore, now Vestas, the speed that they are coming out with these new turbine types and blade length and stuff, it's really it's heavy. It's difficult to cope up with, and I think the supply chain now, I think mixed with a bit of COVID, we really see a lot of delays in projects. China doesn't help with, they're taking off permits at the moment, so that kind of closes that down. We've seen that and some customers, so it's quite different actually. And you say, Simon, it's the same operators that needs to move these things out on the sea, right? And it bulks up.
Yeah, this I can confirm. I mean, our ships are full with the wind turbines and blades and stuff going to the Far East right now, Taiwan, China. So we are fully booked, and like you said, Alexander, the rates are going up. It's going only in one direction. So there is also a lack of tonnage for the transportation, ocean transportation. And now America is picking up the East Coast. We all know, starting 23 going onwards. Which takes also a big amount of transportation. So let's see where that goes. And there are no new builds, nothing on heavy lifters, on installation vessels, so very minimum. Will be challenging, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I guess we're touching upon a very, very important part of this. Is there, a risk of not succeeding on these targets? Do you see these bottlenecks potentially being resolved within the given time that it needs to be resolved? I know it's a difficult question, but anyone want to give it a go?
I mean, I'll start. I think it can be resolved. However, there has to be a coming together of the different elements of the supply chain to actually resolve this problem. I mean, if you look at the historical nature, you've had developers have an interest, OEMs have an interest, installation companies have an interest, and as a port authority, if you're providing infrastructure, there's a long lead-in time to provide some of this infrastructure. 18 months, 20 months, 24 months, 36 months is not uncommon in terms of a lead-in time to build appropriate type of port infrastructure. The competitive nature and the diverse nature of who controls the decision on where a project gets loaded out of doesn't help either. And there really needs to be a coming together to actually realise that these decisions have got to be made by developers, OEMs, and installation companies in association with each other, and to work with the port authorities, simply because it does take so long to do these. Ports are going to have to sequence projects. That land is finite, berths are finite. You cannot just create lots of land and berths for these overnight. It's a 2-3 year project, as Heiko and Thomas have said. So very much so. I fully agree with the question, Alexander.
And I will support this, Simon. I've the last couple of years, I've also now in my previous last year, I was worked at an OEM at Vestas, and I went a bit further also on politically, talking to the foreign ambassador in Houston, in US, where we met up with the Port of Houston simply to figure out some of these solutions, and they were quite honest. Said, what do we need to do to comply with this offshore market? How does it work? We don't have the knowledge. How can we get that, right? So I guess it's and the same for UK. I work with some of there are some lifting restrictions that sometimes can turn down. If you thought you're ready, right, then suddenly you work under suspended load. There are different rules, and they shut down sites, and then it just hits operation. So I think there also needs to be kind of a political willingness around to support the industry here. But I agree with you, Simon. We need to go in the same boat and try and move back further. We've seen the same challenges in. It doesn't matter if in the UK, US. We also see it now in Taiwan, where we are present, building a factory over there, and we also see this political restraintness. It's quite difficult actually to get just a building permit, simple stuff. It's hitting us now. So it's quite challenging, and we have actually done what we've done. If to come with a solution here, we started to work with really close with a shipping company. It's called Martin Benchner. It's a shipping company. They had years of experience from Far East, and they went in there. They had guys on the ground, and we started that already a year back, working with BMS, the crane company, simply to find solutions. Right, we needed to find a spot for a factory with Vestas Offshore. Simply to move these big PCM modules, which cannot go under each bridge, simply to find ourselves a location. And with the authorities, we had a team over there with all these people. And that actually panned out pretty good. It was quite heavy, and we had, we needed to have some people on the ground for quite some months over there. But we actually came up with a good solution and find the right spot for the factory with the support from the industry and the political guys. But it was quite... It was quite exhausting to do, but now we see the benefit of it, right? So now we can comply with a lot of other things, other OEMs are being contacted by us, so we also get business out of it. But you need to do that big exercise to do it. As you say, Sam, get together.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And also we looked into it, especially for the monopiles. I mean, we're going up now to 2,500 tons. So we bought an installation ship, crane ship in US with UX flag for a lifting capacity of 10,000 tons. So we are also looking in this segment now to handle these big components. I mean, this is really challenging, and there are not many units in the world. I mean, we know that it's 5 or 6 you can count on one hand, which are able to handle this stuff, right? So it's really challenging, but it's also as a company you can position yourself, right?
Exactly. So you know, do I interpret you correctly in understanding that the policymakers need to do more, or are they, you know, do they need to do more in not just setting the kind of the ambitious targets and maybe having some subsidy schemes, but also kind of helping out more actively on the kind of the laying the groundwork for new ports to be made available, upgrades and so forth?
To be frank, I think the operational industry, I'm also a part of the KK Wind Solution is also part of the operational. We are a supplier for the wind industry for all the OEMs. So you need to, you know, you don't need to lay down when Vestas comes or Siemens Gamesa. You need to help them. We are doing a lot of planning, operational planning, and also leveling out. You know, I cannot produce for 200 turbines in 1 month. It's simply not feasible. I need to flatten it out and level out my plan, simply to control my supply chain. And we help the OEMs with that. We're also doing it with the Vestas. We have a good agreement. So you need to push back, right? And said, come on, guys, thank you for the order, but now we need to level out and need to agree on a good plan here to operationalize this, unless it won't work. And you need to do that. And I think we're at a point now where they, at least for us, when we talk to them, they listen, definitely. But it's sometimes they don't. But it's a struggle. It's a good discussion. But you need to do that as an operator.
And they should sign the contract earlier and not in the last moment. Which is
exactly.
always the biggest problem, you know.
I completely agree. And then you need, who takes the risk, right?
Exactly.
So Heiko, you also mentioned, you know, ordering a vessel with the lifting capabilities for these larger components, and that is, you know, also a kind of a second layer to the trend. The activity is growing, but also the size of the components, and we know that there are a few new builds that can kind of handle the largest components that we expect. You know, with Siemens Gamesa coming out with its 15 megawatt turbine, GE ramping up its Halley 8X turbine. Vestas now also joining that race after acquiring the shares in MHI. In MHI Vestas, MHI's share, I should say. You know, we're seeing this race on the OEM side, and we're still seeing that new build orders are coming. We did see a shift last year, but it's still going quite slow in terms of, you know, a demand that is growing so rapidly. Do you also see, and I think you alluded to that, you know, we see the same kind of bottleneck there and a demand that outpaces the supply, but can developers do anything else? Should we do anything about contracting strategies? I think we see, you know, these short-term contracts for the installation vessels that in the market as an issue for the bankability of these large-scale investments. Any thoughts on that, Heiko?
Yes, and it comes back to what I said before. They should commit themselves earlier. That gives us sight for the design, for the financing, and so forth. Everything what goes with the project. So, but this is always you negotiating, discussing up to the last moment, and then exactly that time is missing to make it in a proper way. So it's really, I think, and it brings us back. If we want to reach that goal, what is in the pipeline, really we should start thinking on all ends and do it in a better way. And it starts with a signature that you can that we can start our activities, right? And that goes down all the line. I mean, as simple as that. And I think there's potential room for improvement, if you ask me.
Yeah,
I agree, and I actually think if they try to do this exercise, they can also find some cost reductions, right? They can even, you know, reduce their cost, especially their operational cost. If they give you the pre-warning, Heiko, you can probably plan better, and then you can utilize your units, right? And we see the same. We try to do it, and we actually have some. We try to, but it's quite difficult to get the cost out initiatives and said, come on, guys, if you give us now, we can with you, we can give us a check price now, but we can actually reduce it by, I don't know, X%. So
exactly.
Yeah, but they're still squeezing it, right? on time-wise.
Yeah, and also the prices in the shipyards going up. I mean, everything is going only in one direction, right?
Yeah.
I think from my point of view, one of the challenges is future-proofing the infrastructure that's required. I mean, as we said earlier, it takes 2.5-3 years to build a piece of infrastructure. So if a contract for a manufacturing or installation harbour was let today, you're going to have that facility potentially ready in 2.5-3 years' time. The parameters around installation craft will be different in 3 years' time to what they are today. No doubt they will get bigger. The challenges with the installation craft in particular getting bigger and bigger, and if you look at the latest generation of installation craft, 55-60 meters beam, you're getting a reducing number of ports, particularly in the UK, that are able to take these projects. So the efficiencies that companies are looking for by making bigger turbines and having bigger installation crafts are actually causing a problem in themselves, insofar as you're actually reducing the availability of installation harbours. So it's a very, very difficult situation, and there's not an easy answer to this. We're all being asked, the industry is forcing the supply chain to reduce prices in response to pan-European governments' requirements to bring the cost of offshore wind down. But at the same time, they're requiring ever more expensive infrastructure and ever more expensive kit to actually facilitate those turbines, which will bring the price down. It's a vicious circle.
That's a very good point. Any follow-up comments to that from any of you?
No, I agree, and it's also difficult, as you guys saying, because it's also it's what do you say, a competitive advantage for the OEMs, right? You know, who's the best of beating the others, right? I've seen in really years back, you know, someone saying yes to a project, building it somewhere before the others, and some are reluctant, and some they win the contract, right? And today they're bidding on these giga deals where the turbine is not even specified. It's just a number they commit to, not even the turbine type. So we, as you say, Simon, we don't know that which turbines goes up there.
Absolutely.
And that is if Rystad or some of the other big ones, Vattenfall, they can't even tell us which turbine it is.
Exactly.
And then they start the quoting bidding for which OEM's gonna win it, and then I think we are a bit down the chain here of when we get the actual offer.
So we're talking about a lot of these challenges here, and one of the things that we should discuss as well is, you know, the keys to success. And I think, you know, Simon, you alluded to that a little bit in terms of getting together and as across the different activities, the different stakeholders. Any other kind of keys to success to overcome all these challenges that any of the other panelists see, or is this just a dire outlook for not reaching the ambitious targets?
No, that is completely right. What Simon says. So that sounds really good. Simon says, but no. But it's I tried this in the US, and there's a huge potential here. Now for the onshore, for example, there's a huge amount of obsolete trailers in the US that are simply standing around. They're not utilized. They're paid for, but they're standing in the yard of these huge operators over there. It's just and we are obsoleting ourselves in material here, which is completely nonsense. So I guess if and we tried this at Vestas, but there was no. We tried not to point fingers, but we tried the GE guys, the Siemens Gamesa was actually willingly. We never heard from the GE guys because of, I don't know. We tried to utilize this equipment, also moving the big blades, tower equipment, etc. But they need to come back and they get out of the patent race. There's a lot of patents going on in this area. So if they can get their heads out of the patents and then look into more standardized solutions for the operators and owners, because then it'll be easier to execute the projects, right? If you have the same interfaces, the same lifting points, you can utilize the equipment. But it takes an effort from the OEMs. I think they are there, but they need to have. They need to get out of the box. At the moment, I don't hear them coming out of the box, so I hope they will soon, because I know the actual willingness, and they have huge engineering power in those companies. I think Vestas has over 1,000 engineers, if it's not more. Same for Siemens Gamesa, GE, everybody. So it's not a lack of brain power, I guess, or engineering power. It's just a willingness of this shareability and sharing in the industry. I tried it a bit in the US. I think I talked to some of the biggest crane operators, port operators in the US. Everybody, I just kind of put a brief out actually on the Breakbulk that was 2 years ago. And they were like, the room was too small. Now it was before the COVID. But the people were standing up because I asked this question: is anyone willing to standardize? And my God, it was the biggest operators in the US that were on the Special Crane and Rig Association. They did this, and it was tremendous. So I think the willingness from the industry, is there. So if some of the OEMs just would, it cost them €0 penny, actually. So if they were willing to do that exercise, getting some requirements from the operational guys, I think they could get pretty far on an afternoon.
I think from my point of view, to add to what Thomas has just said, what NOF, which is the Industry Association for Supply Chain in the northeast of England, commissioned a survey, and one of the things that came out of it was better engagement rather than hiding behind suppliers portals. Everything is done through suppliers portals, and with the best will in the world, the suppliers portal is okay for if you're providing electrician services or something like that. But a supply chain portal is a very, very difficult way to engage with an OEM or with a developer if you're talking about installation craft or if you're talking about port facilities. These are far more strategic things that need to be discussed, and a supply chain portal is not the right way of dealing with that. As Thomas said, it has to be direct engagement, and that is something that is very frustrating for the whole supply chain, particularly in the northeast of England.
Heiko, any comments to this?
Well, we have also there's one more problem to all these. If you look, for example, for the heavy lift transportation, ocean transportation, right now the oil and gas market was for a time period very calm and quiet, but the oil price is stable. So we see also there are more activities which also limit the ship's volume. This comes also. It's not only wind. No, the whole world is not waiting for the wind, right? So there are also other projects worldwide, LNG in Russia, and like I said, the oil price is stable for a while, and there's appetite for investments. So even there's a competition on that market, right? So it's not wind alone, and if you see the whole global picture, then it's becoming even more challenging.
Yeah, exactly. And from Rystad, we see a slowdown in the market. The market downturn of 2014 through 2016 started a transition for a lot of service companies that just as they got their head out above the water, so to speak, then the pandemic hit, and we saw an acceleration of the transition. But as you say, we're seeing a recovery in the oil and gas market. We're seeing prices stabilize at a higher level, and we're also seeing sanctioning levels expecting them to recover a bit over the next coming years, driving a demand and being a leading indicator. So definitely kind of drawing on the demand as well. But do you see any influx of oil and gas vessels being able to kind of resolve some of these bottlenecks? A lot of the kind of the heavy lift vessels are, let's say, over-spec'd perhaps to do some of the lifting, but to a less extent for every day that passes, it seems. But do you see any kind of potential for oil and gas vessels coming in and solving some of these bottlenecks?
Well, if you're talking PSVs, there's limited what they can do, right? So it's I mean, these wind turbines installation and also maintenance is quite special, and you need some sophisticated tonnage for it or special design tonnage for it. So I don't see there a big help. For the foundation, it's a bit different. There you can use the big floating cranes, chair legs, whatsoever. But once it goes to the tower and up to the nacelles and the blades, I don't see it actually. So no, this is quite special to market, right?
Yeah.
We've done some standardization in the wind industry through ESTA, the organization ESTA, which where we did actually. I know Wind has this APQP for wind, which is a standard quality system they're using in wind power. And I was in it's called RDSPP, which is a standard, which is the power plant way to distinguish signal for power plant, which is a kind of traceability with that. They actually wanted to brighten that. So actually we tried to get the Special Cranes and Rigging Association for US, and then you have ESTA in Europe, and I know they're working together. And I tried. We got together a couple of times. But it was quite difficult to figure out, could we have kind of a lifting standard or a standard for moving these heavy components, right? Moving the blades, where should we lift them? Is it unique? Could we have it in one portal where each operator can access all these different lifting instructions? Because the blades are as they change the dimensions type, it's different if you want to lift a Vestas blade or a Siemens blade or a GE blade or whoever. It's different how you can, they have different lifting instruction, and even securing on vessels and even down to the towers, it is so different. For some vessels, they can go 5 or 4 or 3 high, depending on which type it is, and it is, and it could be good it would actually help the operators also to utilize their load sometimes, and also the ports to know how to take them off, right, and move them in the ports. That's where the most of the damages come. So sometimes maybe it could be good because they have I know they have the OEMs, both at ESTA and SCNA. They are represented in these forums and are part of it, and firm part of the board there. So maybe it could be some places to move these topics up and see if it's possible to move them a bit, because I know they're listening into these areas and create a standard. Start there maybe.
Yeah, standardization is one of the keys to success. I wanted to move a little bit forward as well. We've been talking a little bit about the installation portion and the kind of the rapid ramp up. Heiko, you mentioned it a little bit in the beginning, the O&M space and the growing installed base. Your positioning for that. Do you see any kind of is the industry more prepared for a growing installed base and addressing a larger O&M market and aftermarket, or is there new challenges to be solved in this part of the industry?
No, actually, I'm surprised that there are not more companies who are offering the full-fledged service. This is, if you look into it, that you get everything from one hand, is very limited, and I'm really surprised about it. And this is the reason why we are positioning ourselves there. So I think the industry is so busy in installing right now that this is not, like to say, that sexy to look after sales, right? So and this gives also a bit room to position yourself and to do it. And also, if you see the jackups, I mean the first generation jackups which installed the North Sea and part of Baltic. I mean they are right now only for maintenance because they're too small for the new generation installation. So and this is what we try to collect now, the old units in getting into the services, So it's I think the focus of the industry is pretty much in installing and not in maintenance, I have to say. And there are more problems than everybody thought. So it's a huge amount of the main component exchanges, more than expected. And I think, Thomas, you know that too, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
It's surprising what volume there is.
We have exploded the last year and a half around 300% in requests. At a point we simply couldn't. We didn't have people to reply on the offers, and sometimes they just they called us and said, can you do it? And I said, yeah, we're sure. And normally we have quite a quoting phase, we have engineering phase, we want to ensure that we have the right product. And I said, and then a sales guy said, yeah, well, but if you can do it, if you have it off the shelf, we'll just buy it and just put the order without a number.
Mm-hmm.
And that's crazy that in this market, right? When you think about the other part where you actually quote for a project and they squeeze the price and then they do renegotiation again. But here they just put an order.
Exactly.
You can't just pick a number, but it's relative, right? And it's that's what you say, Heiko. It's actually a total paradigm shift. So exactly. I think the offshore service market is, and we even had some at last year at Christmas, New Year, we had people in the turbines, exchanging components.
Exactly. We see the same. It's amazing. And then end of the day, the repowering. I mean, look at it. It will come as well.
Exactly. We'll get to that repowering part in a second. I think one question I have on the O&M space: do you see any shifts in different company strategies? I think we've at least observed that some of the OEMs are trying to lock in longer-term service agreements when selling off, securing a turbine contract, etc., to kind of capture more of the aftermarket. Of course, that from one view that makes sense in trying to kind of secure a business after this wave of growth that we are seeing in this decade. Do you see any such changes, Heiko?
Well, surprisingly, the older parks, which are now 5-6 years old and out of the warranty, they're easy to approach, I have to say, with a new concept, and this surprised me in the beginning a bit, I have to say. I didn't expect that, but it looks like there's a lack, and like we said, I mean, everybody's concentrating on the other side, but I mean, it's also very price sensitive, since the government, there's not that much money you gain for the grid, right? To place it in the grid. So that also becomes a topic, and if you do everything from one hand, and you have more than one park, and you have a factory which you can bring the goods through, and it's for me that's quite interesting market.
I agree, Heiko, and again, if you can reflect on the onshore market and compare it a bit, right? I remember 10 years ago, I worked at Vestas in a factory out in Lem. That's where they started to make turbines. Yeah. There came this funny request from Germany. There was an old park with these kilowatt turbines, and they asked, "Can you exchange these with the main shaft was simply worn up. They were too old, and they were 20 years old." And then they had the sales guy coming from, and we actually did the first repowering. And then we put a 2 megawatt turbine, and we made the calculations for the towers, and it looked quite funny, but we could still make it work. But the business case for there was farmers. It was a team of farmers, and they're still running today. And it's 10 years ago, and I think they're 30 years old. This park, so I think it's just picking up now for the offshore, as you say, Heiko, and maybe this is an unseen trend that will simply just pick up. So I think it's a good way, right? Also to utilize maybe the old jackups.
Exactly. Yeah.
So from my point of view, obviously, the Port of Tyne was selected by Equinor to be the O&M base for Dogger Bank, and work is underway on providing that facility to be operational by 2023. What we are expecting and what we're allowing for is quite a significant increase of supply chain activity to come alongside that. There has been interest from companies who are within the Equinor supply chain elsewhere in the UK to think about operations at the Port of Tyne. So that is something that we are planning for, and we're doing redevelopment because we expect that to happen. I think the repower discussion, which we're going to turn to in a minute, is an interesting one, because that hasn't really been thought about a lot up to now in the UK, but we have had some initial inquiries about repowering and holding, let's call it, strategic stock and spares in UK ports So yeah.
Excellent. I think that's a good segue into that repowering question, and we've been touching upon it a little bit already. Been a more significant part of the onshore wind market. It is primarily, we've seen some examples in the older wind farms in Denmark and so forth. Some of the turbines switched out, but still a limited market, but growing in relevance every day, right? And the question is then repowering or decommissioning and a full kind of change out of the park, for example. How do you see this play out? And Thomas, maybe you want to start.
Yeah, definitely. It's so one of the benefits of doing repower is because you skip a lot of steps, right? You have the park, you have the permits, you have the grid, you have the connection. You just need a kind of a preliminary approval that you will actually do more and your grid and everybody is built up to that. And then of course you need to do some engineering work on the calculation. If you put some new on the top and it spins around, it also needs to last the next 20 years, 25 years. So and that was the biggest exercise. But when you've done that, you can execute extremely fast. The projects that are running, they're only running for a couple of months, 3 months, and then they're commissioned and then they're ready to go. It's I would not say plug and play. Then I'll be shot by an engineer sometime. But it is pretty close. Sometimes you need to change the cabling inside a tower, and that is not just something you do. But if you compare it to putting a monopile down and having an installation, it's relatively. Now I'm saying relatively a limited cost on it, and you could do it in a short time horizon. And then maybe in some of these solar parks you can double your output, and that is beneficial. There's a good business case behind that.
Exactly, and yeah, so most of the lowest hanging fruits here in the offshore wind industry has already been picked, but with the smallest turbines, there's a vast potential of kind of increasing the efficiency of these components. Heiko, any comments to what Thomas just said here?
No, it's exactly what we're looking into it. So that's a bit the future. I see there a big market and big potential, and decommissioning. Well, if it's not repowering, it's decommissioning, right? So and then we take the park out, including cables and everything. So there's a lot of work to be done, and life cycle of a wind park, Thomas, 20 years right now, and then we see what's going on and what they do.
I think
the first ones are coming out, right? So it's a reality.
Exactly. I think the challenges for repowering and are really what as well is what's in it for ports, because a repowering facility is going to need is effectively let's call it a mini installation facility. I mean, with a stock holding facility, and it requires the same. Facilities and depth as what an installation harbour does, and whereas with an installation harbour you're getting quite a significant level of activity, with a repowering facility it's not that level of intensity, so that there is a real question to be answered is what is the value of a repowering terminal within a port, given the value of port land at the moment, and nobody's even started to think about addressing that question.
Yeah, interesting, and luckily a main scope for the next decade, and that's probably why no one is thinking about it these days. We're running out of time here, but I wanted to just kind of at the end here, we've been focusing on Europe, and we've been alluding a little bit to it, but the US East Coast is kind of a special case in the next kind of second half of this decade, where a new target has been set, 30 gigawatts by 2030. Lots of activity that needs to happen for that to be achieved. And then you have the Jones Act, with which requires vessels to be US flagged. Someone is looking into, or several are looking into, feeder vessel strategies and getting vessels from the US market. But then we've also talked about a US market being quite constrained as well. how do you see developers and states achieving their targets in the US market? And do you have any thoughts on that?
I did some work nearly 3 years ago with Willett Kempton from Delaware University on looking at the Eastern Seaboard and the disparate nature of power agreements where it's statewide as opposed to sort of federal in the UK. Federal in the US is a further challenge, that each state wants its own power supply and its own wind farm by a certain date. The issues were each state wanted its own manufacturing facility, each state wanted its own installation facility, each state wanted its own O&M base. And whilst we may have issues in Europe, the geographical nature of the Eastern Seaboard is even more complicated for this type of vessel. So it was quite heartening to hear that things have got together in terms of the US, but they all wanted their power plant and their wind turbine farm built at the same time, and they had the same problem as what Europe has insofar as no sequencing. I know things have taken place since then, and I've been in touch with Willett recently, and things are getting better, but still a major challenge for the US East Coast.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's quite interesting. I went to US 10 years ago and down to Texas, Houston, and then I went back here. I've been there through the years, and just seeing like the heartland of oil, and they have all these wind turbines, scraping up between these oil fields, which is quite interesting. And it's a change of culture, right? But I think you're right, Simon. It is they have these state permit agreement between how they can move units, and then they won't allow it because you need to cross a state border. And we've had this onshore challenge for many years. That's also why we needed to be in the different OEMs. I know Siemens, because they're present there, they have also spent quite some time and money on getting these cross permits. Also, if you need to have a production unit in Mexico, for example, where the labor is cheaper and so on, you still need to move it across the border, right? Plus, you can not, shipping it is you'll be hit by the Jones Act, etc. You have these, but you can actually. We have moved some units inland on the rivers down there into to inland actually, where we had restraints. But it is. This challenge of having in the States is quite challenging actually. But I think if the business case is good, it normally goes through.
Great, thanks, Heiko. 1 minute of comments before we conclude this session. Any last minute thoughts on the US market?
Well, yeah, like I said, we are looking into it. We just recently bought these lift ship American flag Jones Act compatible, so definitely we position ourselves there. Unfortunately, and that comes back. We are discussing right now with one park owner the feeder dock solution. They want to install 24, and you need to build a unit which takes 3 years with a huge crane on it. So everything takes time, but there is no time contract, So it's we need more commitment and earlier commitment. That would help enormous, especially in America.
Okay, I see we are running out of time here. I want to thank all of the 3 panelists for all the insights that you've shared and all of your interesting views on the market, the challenges, and some of the solutions. Thank you, gents, and we'll open the floor to some questions.